Hey everybody, it's Master Galengeist here, bringing you my review for the season premiere of She-Hulk Attorney at Law, A Normal Amount of Rage. Sweet Jesus. But, overall, I actually really enjoyed this episode. Now, granted, there is the kind of problem that we have seen most of this episode through the trailers. Granted, without certain amount of context, but that's the whole kind of thing. We've seen most of the Hulk and She-Hulk kind of training stuff that we get in the bulk of this episode in the trailer. So that would be my most kind of negative bit for it. And otherwise, I actually really enjoyed this. Now, granted, this comes in at around. It says 37 minutes on Disney Plus, about 35 taking out certain kind of credits and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, this is on the shorter side, but it did a decent enough job, in my opinion, of introducing Jennifer Walters' character. Yeah, Jennifer Walters' character, and uh, actually giving us not as much as I would like, but we do get more information on Hulk and Smart Hulk and all different kind of things to be like, how the fuck is this kind of making sense with Bruce Banner being in Bruce Banner mode at the end of Shang-Chi, and then we seen him in as Smart Hulk form and what all that kind of works about. We do actually get answers for that kind of stuff. Now, granted, depending upon who you are, you might not like those answers and how it's kind of executed, and I get that. There are certain things that, like, execution could have been done a little bit better for me, but I'm overall pretty much happy with it. So we actually start off this episode, and we're kind of treated to what we think is the first fourth wall break, as Jen is practicing her closing argument for a case about a company that had pretty much misused its power and did harm to the public, and that those with power like that should be held accountable for that power. And it's like, okay, it's a different kind of way of like great power comes with great responsibility, but we do see that that is a key kind of aspect in this episode as Jen has to deal with kind of her changing situation. And one dude's like, just let me do it, and her kind of friend's like, no, she's got this. We get her talking about like a savage Jen look. And I'm like, okay, nice little thing there with like Savage She-Hulk and all that. And as they're getting ready to pretty much leave, she then turns to us to be like, okay, we're doing this lawyer kind of stuff, but I know you want to get into the Hulk stuff, so let's get that shit out of the way, pretty much. And I'm like, okay, that's actually an effective fourth wall break and a nice way to set up how we're going to deal with the bulk of the time of this episode. So we shift over, and she had evidently been on a road trip with Bruce, and we see them in the car. We see that he is in his Bruce Banner form, that he was evidently had an inhibitor on to keep him in human form to actually try and help with healing his arm, which is an interesting one, and I needed kind of more explanation of potentially it would go something like this. If you are damaged in probably Banner mode, if you turn it into the Hulk, it probably is healed as fast as possible. And granted, with the Infinity Snap that he did, maybe shifting him over to Banner would help facilitate more healing on his Hulk form. That's kind of what I was getting at. And she's actually bringing up this whole thing of like, it sucks that Captain America was a virgin. He didn't have much time and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of a running joke that actually kind of works in this show. Not that it is done overly, like they don't beat it with a dead horse. You get nice kind of, not escalation, but you keep it getting brought up, but not like every 3 minutes or whatnot. Like you get some stuff here a little bit later on, and then a nice stinger at the post-credit scene that we get. Well, they're pretty much just trying to catch up, and Bruce is like, why the hell do you have chopsticks with the Cheetos so that way you don't get like the Cheeto fingers and everything? Well, the thing is, she's kind of like explaining this, but then we see a spaceship come out of nowhere, and she tries to dodge and rolls the car and everything, and they get into a vehicle crash. And the thing is, she gets cut up and everything, so she's got open wounds, and she's trying to get Bruce out of the car. And he's like, dang, my inhibitor's fucked up. Jen, watch out for my blood, because he's got gamma radiated blood. And this is where we get like kind of, not big change, but it is an interesting change that changes the dynamics of what goes on with She-Hulk. Now, granted, I'm not as versed with She-Hulk's origins, but I know that she got severely injured and Bruce gave her blood for a transfusion, and that's how she became She-Hulk. However, in this show, with this, she accidentally gets infected, and that kind of changes the dynamic of what's going on. She was helping out her cousin, and boop, we see it infect her. She starts hulking out and runs. And see, that's the thing. Normally, this would probably kill somebody, but we learn later on that her and Bruce have kind of a similar kind of 1 in a million kind of genetic kind of thing. Granted, I understand that that's kind of almost a throwaway kind of, that sounds really plot demandsy, and I will agree. It's like, okay, normally it'd be like, okay, this would kill most people, but for you, it got you into a Hulk form. So she's running through the woods. She wakes up later and is like, what the fuck's going on? She sneaks into this bar. She doesn't have any shoes on and goes into like a public restroom to kind of like fiddle with herself. Well, not public. She goes into this bar, kind of sneaks in the back because she's like, I don't want to explain this. I don't have any money. I kind of need help. But then all these ladies come in because it's ladies' night. And like, oh, they just help her out. Granted, like the feasibility of it is, like, if you would think that would actually happen, is like, okay, I can understand that. But it's nice to see that these women just came and was like, are you okay? What the fuck happened to you? And it's like, yeah, she looks like she got fucked the hell up and needs help. And they give her shoes, they let her borrow a phone, they give her clothes and everything like that. It's just, it was really nice. And I was like, thank you for helping her. And she's pretty much trying to get in contact with Bruce and figure out kind of what's going on. She's waiting outside. And then these like guys approach her and of course try and like come on to her, and she's like, hello, my cousin boyfriend's pretty much coming, but she of course is in freak out mode because she doesn't know what's kind of going on, so she's kind of more on edge than usual. Granted, I would be too, because alien spaceship came out of nowhere, you were in a car accident, you got shit in you, and then you went, oh, and you're like, I don't know what the fuck happened. And then she kind of like goes kind of in rage / fear mode. She hulks out, and then here's the one thing that I also have. I don't understand what happened here, but I think that Bruce kind of like got her, because she's like, whoa, kind of hulked out at him, and then something slams into her, and then she wakes up in Bruce's house in Mexico that we learn. And she's like walking around the house. I do like the one thing where they do kind of classic band t-shirts where she's got like a Led Zeppelin one that was left. She's like, Bruce? And they're like, where? No, she's like, where the fuck am I? And she's like, hello? And then she gets down in the basement and we see that Bruce is in Smart Hulk form. And I must say that the finalized product of the graphics for both of them in their Hulk forms are a lot better here. Like, let the graphics people do their jobs, Marvel. Don't fucking overwork them. Slow your shit down so that way your quality works out. Because I was like, what the fuck's going on with this quality control for these graphics when we first started seeing stuff from the She-Hulk show. However, the finalized product works pretty well in my opinion. It doesn't look fake, and even though it's kind of weird, it still works well enough that it doesn't break immersion and have you like, okay, these are two people who have Hulk powers and are interacting with each other. It works well enough. So, we get the lowdown that this is actually his place that he spent the blip at, and that Tony helped build it for him because it's Hulk size too, so that way he can walk around as the Hulk. And it was really cool to see that being brought up, that friendship between him and Tony. He joked that Tony said that he'd come back and get it one day, and that you tell from how Ruffalo can emote with Banner in the Smart Hulk form that he misses Tony, and it's nice to kind of have that kind of fallout and to explore that fallout a little bit. Again, they don't explore it very much here, but just having it is, I'm glad that it's at least acknowledged and at least being used as a point. And she's like, okay, what the fuck's going on? He's like, okay, here's the thing. You kind of got the same thing. You got a lethal dose of gamma. You should be dead, but you had the same kind of thing as me. However, yours is a little bit different. Like, your way of able to be healing and everything like that let me synthesize some shit. That way I could heal my Hulk stuff, and my arm's okay. It's like, okay, yes, thank you for that. It's simple, it's effective, a little bit plot demandsy, but it needed to be at least talked about. It's like, okay, why is he like all right here in Hulk form? And then he does this dramatic thing of like destroying him, like, yeah, that could introduce a lot of crazy ass shit. It's like, okay, I understand that, but if you could help with like an expedited healing factor and helping people that way, with like balancing out the side effects of like I'd Hulk out if my emotions got kind of nutty, you could work on that. But he's trying to be like, listen, you gotta like change up your life and everything because you're a Hulk now. And she's like, no, I just want to kind of get back to being a lawyer. Now, granted, she keeps like hitting that point over and over again, and Bruce is still trying to explain and getting through that whole kind of thing that we got, power and responsibility in the beginning, through to her. But we do get to, like, he's like, listen, here's the binder that I got, and we're going to go through this, and we're going to figure this out. It's funny because the way he kind of got her to kind of calm down about it, she didn't, like, Hulk out of her, was to give her pancakes, and he's like, listen, we'll go through this binder, it's a multi-year journey, and we'll kind of get through this. So then we see the part where he has the buzzsaw thing, and she's like, fuck that shit, and rips open the door. He's like, that was like $1 million door. He's like, Jen. And she's like, what? And he's like, wait a minute, you don't have like another that you're wrestling control over? No. And that's the kind of cool aspect that we get here. She-Hulk is different than Bruce is. Normally, she does not have another personality to contend with. I say normally because sometimes certain writers go in different ways with how that kind of works out. Sometimes having a separate kind of Hulk persona, not as distinct maybe as Bruce and the Hulk, but enough that we get like a savage kind of She-Hulk with a more kind of like angry Jen kind of thing. Whereas here, it's more like, no, I'm in control. He's like, well, you don't have to deal with that then. And then going on about being like, okay, so that kind of changes up how we have to kind of handle this situation. And then pretty much trying to get her into a Zen kind of thing of accepting the kind of state that she's in, trying to figure out how to more control her emotions, because now it gets to a point that there will be repercussions if she cannot do that, because she can Hulk out and hurt somebody if she's not careful. You know what I mean? Now, granted, through the comics we learned that she has more control over that kind of aspect. However, when you're new to it, you don't realize your own strength. So even though she is in control, she could theoretically accidentally grab somebody too hard, even though she doesn't think it's too hard, and severely hurt them. So it is good that Banner's trying to do this, even though she's like, I don't want to be a Hulk, I just want to be a lawyer. And it's like, that's understandable. However, you've gotten into a situation that's not going to be possible. You have to balance these out. So he's trying to teach her kind of mindfulness kind of techniques, kind of figuring out her purposes, seeing her like toss boulders, and Hulk Banner doing his kind of stuff, be like, yeah, okay, because she throws it farther, and then he kind of like chucks one through pretty much the atmosphere. He's like, yeah, just want to show you how it's done. Him blasting her with the air horn, but he's doing it for scientific and comedic purposes. He's like, okay, you revert to Jen when you're unconscious, when you're asleep, and he's like, all right, do you feel what kind of rage level do you have? A normal amount of rage because you got air horn when you were asleep as she broke the bed. Bringing up that she's got to reinforce her bed, she's got to have like 10-foot ceilings, spandex is her best friend because she could change at a moment's notice, and if she's not careful, she'd pretty much be naked, kind of like Hulk. You know what I mean? So it does make sense that when you're a Hulk, you want to have spandexy stuff. Then he's like, okay, I've pretty much been hitting on the kind of negatives of being a Hulk. One of the positives is you don't really get drunk. You can drink a fuck ton. And then they're just like doing it at this bar that like Tony and Banner built, which was kind of cool. Still kind of reminiscing over there. They're doing kind of burping stuff on it. But the thing is, we learned that even though they get drunk as the Hulk and they don't get that hangover, Jen turned back into her human form. She's like, I still have to deal with this fucking Hulk-sized hangover. She's like, yep. Careful on that. And we see them doing various kind of stuff, the usual kind of ground pounding, testing out certain things, him pushing her off a ledge, jumping up. See, this is where the whole thing is. You've seen a lot of this stuff with this in the trailers. And I kind of wish that they had gone less is more with this, because this is good stuff. Granted, you get the context of it, but it's like, okay, I've seen most of this. Let's see. Oh, Banner does give us the information that was a Sakarian message courier, and he kind of could get to a point that they have to deal with something with that. So we'll have to see if that kind of like does anything. But we do know that like Jen would potentially be the most heavily focused. So we'll have to see if that kind of shows up later on in the series, and Jen has to deal with it, or potentially it'll be kind of like a seed that Banner might have to deal with in another movie or whatnot, or it could just have been the inciting incident and we won't get much else. I do like they at least dovetailed that in. He also brings up, like, yeah, this Hulk thing's not completely known. I've been trying to document my stuff, and like at one point I was pretty much out of the loop for 2 years when the Hulk was going around, so you gotta watch that shit. It's like, yes. But she's like, listen, I'm pretty much good. I just want to go back to being a lawyer. And Banner, of course, is more cautious on this because he knows the repercussions of what happens if a Hulk gets out of control, and he does not want that to happen to Jen. And that's where they kind of get into their fight. And this was an interesting one because we do see Banner get more kind of angry as the smart Hulk. But the thing is, it's never like completely rage-inducing where he's like completely lost control. So it's really kind of cool to see that augment this stuff as we see him being able to do a really big boom clap, whereas Jen does more of a multiple clap, and how that is still useful in like pretty much putting him into a position where he's like, God damn, that's fucking with me. Granted, I do wish that they had tweaked this a little bit better, because she pretty much like runs him over a little bit with this giant Jeep, and then she kind of gets out, and he's kind of like calling her out on it, and she's like, fuck this shit, and they start like fighting each other, and they accidentally destroy the bar, but she helps him out, and this is where we get the first pretty much fourth wall break after the accident, where he's like, alright, if you want to be a lawyer, go for it, we'll see how this kind of works out. And she's like, nah, he doesn't believe that. And then she's kind of surprised and looks over, it's like, okay, leading us to believe that the gamma exposure has potentially unlocked her ability to pretty much break the fourth wall, which is an interesting kind of concept, that like these gamma powers could give you that kind of ability to perceive other dimensions, i.e. us watching them. So I would kind of go that route, rather than that she just randomly is like, I can break the fourth wall and talk to the audience. Whereas if they were smart about it, they could essentially tie it into the whole multiversal kind of thing of like, there are universes that watch our universes, because the multiverse isn't just there's an infinite amount of Jens and an infinite amount of Bruce Banners. It's like every which way. It's infinite going long ways. Up, down, all the kind of thing. Like infinitely, gigantically bigger universes than us where we're like the atom of an atom, and then other ones that are infinitesimally smaller. And who knows, you could have the ability, because you get superpowers, to perceive one of those ones that could watch you, i.e. us. So that's kind of what I get from that. But he helped her out. She's like, okay, we're good. And she goes. Her family and everybody's appraised of the situations and all that. And we don't know exactly the length of time that it took to do this. So I kind of would have liked at least some kind of signposts of how long she was with Bruce in Mexico. But it doesn't really completely destroy anything either. So we then get back to the president's like, all right, now it's time to do the lawyer show stuff. So they pretty much get there. We get the defendant doing their closing arguments before Jen pretty much gets up to do hers. And then we randomly get Titania, there we go, busting in and breaking it, and then her friend's like, go do She-Hulk. So she She-Hulks out, and she's pretty good. She's able to like stop certain stuff and pretty much take out Titania, and it's like, alright, cool. So her clothes are kind of ripped up, she gets her shoes on, which was really kind of weird because her friend, it made a thing like it was important how she was putting the shoes, but it looked like the shoes were changed from what were almost similar to, okay, I use this as kind of a guidepost of weird editing and shit. In Ocean's 11, we see Brad Pitt eating this plate of shrimp cocktail. But then at one point it switches to a bowl and then switches back to a plate. I believe. It's been a while, but it's almost similar to like the stormtrooper banging its head. Like, once you notice it, you don't fucking not notice it. Here, I didn't, like, the shoes that she's got on at the end look different than the ones that her friend put back out. But she's like getting back together and she's like, alright, ready to do my closing argument. And that's where the episode ends before the end credit scene. Now, I'm just like, okay, is there a reason why she, like, popped up? So hopefully we get some information on that, why she just busted in, and we had She-Hulk had to take care of it. And actually, I was okay with the action scene. Her in action worked pretty well, just like we had with, well, no, it's not exactly like what we had with Bruce, because in that it was pretty much two CGI characters doing their shit in more of a CGI environment, whereas there were more CGI and practical kind of stuff because there were other people around as well. This melded pretty well in my opinion, for being the kind of show that it is versus what could usually be done in a movie. So I'm like, alright, cool. And showed that she has a nice kind of handle on her shit, even though she doesn't think that she's a superhero. Then we get the end credit scene where she was pretty much getting drunk and complaining about how sad it was that Captain America with that ass was not a virgin. And then Hulk gives us the information that no, in 1943 on a USO tour, Steve Rogers lost his virginity. And she's like, yes! All right, I knew he didn't die a virgin. And here's the subtle kind of thing. Everybody thinks that Steve Rogers is dead, but Hulk never says anything that Steve did or Steve... Like, he always uses Steve in the present tense because I think he knows that Steve's alive and out there doing kind of shit. And it's funny because then it pretty much ends with her seeing, pretty much shouting, Captain America fucks, before having the fuck kind of cut out as it goes out there. That was just a funny little moment, and was a nice kind of end cap to the whole Captain America joke. And pretty much putting to rest the whole kind of fan debate of, like, was Captain America a virgin? And all that kind of shit. So, I really enjoyed this episode. I like Jen's character and the potential that we've got, and the weird kind of shit that we would get legally for a superhero show. That is a setup that I am interested in. What kind of laws would you do? How does the Sokovia Accords work into certain kind of things? It's weird. I get that. That's not for everybody, but I hope that we get kind of that added into the fact of, like, She-Hulk doing cool superheroic shit. You can blend those pretty well. And I do like the actress that they got for Jen. She works very well. Granted, however, in this, she's kind of one note of, like, I want to get back to my life, and not understanding the repercussions of what she can do. Of, like, she doesn't look after what happened. I mean, she kind of gets it after she destroyed the bar a little bit, but we don't really get as much self-introspection as we potentially could have. But we'll see if that kind of goes on later as she kind of deals more and more with trying to interact with the rest of the world in her She-Hulk form, and what that kind of does. Like, do people like her, Jen Walters, or do they like She-Hulk? And what's the kind of difference between that? Is there a difference, and can she present that there really is not that much of a difference, even though she turns into a giant green lady? You know what I mean? Hopefully that becomes an important kind of aspect. So I did like the acting all around, because it's mainly carried by Mark Ruffalo and I want to pronounce her name right, Tatiana Maslany. Maslany? Yeah. She worked. I'm like, okay, I'm happy with this. I'm happy to see kind of where this goes. Now, as the second to last thing in Marvel's Phase 4, granted, this does have 9 episodes, so it does have a longer amount of time. We'll have to see how that works out pacing-wise, okay? Because the thing that has been the current kind of weakness is that most of these shows have felt like elongated movies. And that it's like, okay, everything is too long and also too compacted as well. It's like, okay, pacing's like, what the fuck? We'll see how this 9 episode works out. So hopefully Marvel's like, okay, let's give this the amount of episodes it needs and see what goes on. And they could set up some better kind of stuff for maybe potentially evening out Marvel Phase 4. Though at this point, this is probably my least favorite phase of the MCU at the moment. But I enjoyed this. I would definitely recommend this. We'll see kind of how it works out. as a lawyer show, I hope they do commit to that at most and be like, okay, let's do these lawyer kind of stuff, explore the superhero stuff, and still have some interesting stuff going on as her doing She-Hulk superhero stuff. So, yeah, I was surprised at how much I liked this. I was like, all right, I wasn't bored. I wasn't like disappointed or anything. I'm like, all right, let's see how this works. I was like, all right, I'll keep that kind of thought process going forward and be like, let's see how this works out. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.